Children, let's see the third and the final way to solve quadratic equation. What is the third way to solve quadratic equation? We have seen two ways. The first one being by method of factorization, second is by formula method, and the third is here by method of completing square. So the title says solving quadratic equation by method of completing the square. This is the third and the final method in your syllabus. Now children, in order to solve quadratic equation via this particular method, there are certain steps which we are supposed to follow. Mind you, the steps are standard. The steps are very much standard for every single sum. We just have to memorize this particular step, follow this step orderly, and we can solve every single sum by method of completing square. Right? So let's start with the steps involved. Follow these steps religiously and that too orderly. You are not supposed to follow them in any haphazard manner. You have to follow the order. Right? So let's see what is the first one trying to say. Steps involved. First step, transfer the constant term to the RHS. Transfer the constant term to the RHS. So we are very much aware by this time that a quadratic equation has a constant term. Say for example, 3x square plus 5x plus 8 equals to 0. Then 8 is regarded as a constant term. Right? So step number 1, transfer the constant term on the RHS. So transfer the constant term to the RHS. Step number 1. Step number 2, divide both the sides by coefficient of x square. Divide on both the sides. Now why will I say on both the sides? Because you have already transferred the constant on the RHS. Right? So divide both the sides by coefficient of x square. Step number 2. Now comes step number 3. Since our heading says completing square, that means our LHS is not a perfect square and we have to make it as a perfect square. So there is something called as last term. So what is step number 3 trying to say? Find the last term using the formula. So after applying step number 1 and step number 2, step number 3 is always find out the last term using the formula. What is the last term formula? Last term is equals to half into coefficient of x the whole square. What is last term and how can we find out last term? Last term is equals to half into coefficient of x the whole square. After finding the last term, after finishing off step number 3, add the last term to both the sides of the equation, which makes LHS a perfect square. So having found out last term, we need to add that last term on both the sides of the equation, LHS as well as RHS. The moment we add the last term on the LHS side as well as on the RHS side, but it will make LHS a perfect square. Add the last term to both the sides of the equation, which makes LHS a perfect square. LHS has to be a perfect square after adding the last term. Mind you, it has to be. We are going to see everything in detail in sums. Next step, take square on both the sides with both the signs. Take square root on both the sides. Take square root on both the sides with both the signs. Find the value of x to get the solution set. Take square root on both the sides with both the signs. Find the value of x to get the solution set. Once again, we have to memorize it. We have to memorize these steps in an orderly way. Step number 1, what is it? Always transfer the constant on the RHS. Kindly look. Step number 1, always transfer the constant on the RHS. Step number 2, divide throughout by coefficient of x square. Divide throughout by coefficient of x square. Step number 3, find out the last term. What is the formula for last term? Last term is half into coefficient of x the whole square. Half into coefficient of x the whole square. Step number 4, whatever we got last term as, add last term to both the sides of equation. Add last term to both the sides of equation, that is LHS and RHS. The moment we add last term to LHS, LHS has to be a perfect square. LHS will be a perfect square. Next step, taking square root on both the sides. Taking square root on both the sides. And finally, find the value of x to get the solution set. Find the value of x to get the solution set. Children, refresh this, revisit this, unless and until you by heart all the 6 steps, you keep on memorizing this. Why? The moment you know these 6 steps, your every single sum of completing square, that is solving quadratic equation with the help of completing square method, is very, very simple, right?